Now I should mention I prefer cameras with a trigger speed of less than half a second. Hello. Take care of that right now. What's going on, everyone? This is Andrew Penzi with Vital Point once again, and here today because it is trail camera season. I hope you're hanging some trail cameras. So I wanted to give you my recommendation of the top trail cam for under $100 because $100 is my limit. I don't know about you guys, but I can't be spending $500 on some Reconyx, camera that sends the pictures to my phone. I'd love to, but it's not going to happen. Especially when you want to get a bunch of cameras. You only have about 6 to 8 weeks, really, of prime season to get good images before you want to clear out of the woods and let it rest before hunting season. So in that time, I like to blast the woods with as many cameras as possible. So I can't buy 10 $500 cameras. Heck, I can't even buy one. So forget that. So I'm looking at cameras under $100, and so far I've looked at brands such as Moultrie, Wildgame Innovations, Primos, several models of the Primos cameras, and Tasco camera. So let's talk about these, and I'll tell you pros and cons and why I like the one I do. All right, so I'm starting off with the Wildgame Innovations here. This was actually one of the first cameras I got. Wildgame Innovations, they have some really cheap cameras for the feature list that they have. It's kind of impressive to see all the features for the price. However, I have had a lot of problems with this camera. First of all, they are not very compatible with a Mac computer. So if you have a Mac computer, stay away. Also, one time I had this camera set up, and when I was walking in to retrieve it, there were like 4 or 5 deer standing right in front of the camera. I thought, wow, I'm gonna have some great images of this from the camera here, of these deer. And I look at the SD card later on, I didn't get one picture of those deer. And the camera was working because it got a picture of me taking the camera off, and it got some other pictures on there, but it missed all these pictures of these deer that were right in front of it. So that sent up a big red flag that, Houston, we have a problem. It's pretty simple user interface, and there's no Python lock spot for it. So I don't like that either because I've had too many cameras stolen. And so what I do, I've gotten these camera lock boxes, but I tell you, I hate these things. They are heavy and clunky. They make a lot of noise. They're just a pain to bring in and set up. But they do keep your camera safe, and I've used them successfully with this, and it's kind of this one I've coated with some spray paint and stuff, so it sticks a little bit, but basically goes in something like that. And it has a spot for the Python lock. So that's an option you could do, but generally speaking, for under $100, sorry Wildgame Innovations, this one's not for me. All right, next up is the Tasco camera. You know what? There's not a lot of features even mentioned on the website of this thing, so I don't have a lot to tell you about the technical specs of it, but I can tell you that it's 8 megapixel. There's a couple versions out there, so go with the 8 megapixel one. That's the highest one out there. What I like about the camera, though, it's nice and small and nice and light. It does have a Python lock spot, although someone could really just pop these clips off and take the camera if they really wanted to, or they could just break the plastic. It's fairly simple to use. It wasn't too bad. I didn't really have to read the book. I was able to figure it out. I like user-intuitive cameras. And now the main thing on this one is the price, $28. For $28, it's a pretty good camera. However, I just retrieved a bunch of images, and what happens is at night, the camera sort of gets tunnel vision and only shoots pictures of like what's right in front of it. It's like a cone of vision. So there were a bunch of deer just to the corners of that cone, and you couldn't really make them out. So in my mind, you know what, I'm spending a lot of time to go hang these cameras, a lot of effort, and $28 might not be worth it if the images you're going to get aren't really going to show you what quality deer you're looking at. You can see there's deer there, but if you can't make out if it's a buck or a doe or how big of a buck it is, it doesn't really serve its purpose. So then I wonder if it's really worthwhile. But if you're really on a tight budget for $28, let's say it's the best camera under $50 that I've found. So that's the Tasco 8 megapixel camera. Not a bad option for the price. All right, I should mention I prefer cameras with a trigger speed of less than half a second if possible, because I do not like pictures of deer's asses. And I had too many of them where you just see half the deer and you can't see, you know, the front half of it, which is kind of the crucial component there. So that's one of the things I look for. So I picked up a couple Moultrie cameras, two different models here. First is an 800 series camera. I'm going to tell you right off the bat, I don't like the camera, and I'll tell you why. It is not user intuitive. I can't stand it. Every time I set this thing up, I got to study this thing for like 15 minutes to try to figure out if I have the settings correct. I never know if it's on or if it's off. Getting the SD card out is like you need a tweezers to be able to get the SD card out, unless you have, you know, pencil-sized fingers. Very difficult to get it out of there. Other than that, it takes pretty good images. I think this one, let's see, is 14 megapixel, so pretty good image quality. So what happens on this one, it has a spot for a Python lock, but it's just in a horrible position, and it's at a like stupid angle. When you put the Python lock in, see how it goes like behind the camera? So that holds the camera out from the tree. So then you have to bend it around to go around the tree, and it's just a nightmare. I don't like setting it up. It's just always a nightmare. I do not like the camera. So that's the Moultrie 800 series, not my choice. Okay, now in this hand, I have the Moultrie 20i camera. Again, all these cameras I got for under 100 bucks. Now, this camera is a little easier to set up than the other, but still not super user intuitive. I wasn't crazy about the setup of this camera. What I do like is it's nice and compact. It's got a spot for a Python lock, although someone could just break these plastic clips and walk away with your camera, but it's a deterrent, right? What'd I say, 12 megapixel? 12 megapixel, but the images I've seen, they are a little bit fuzzy. They're not super sharp, and I might have some examples I could show you. So not a bad camera. This one is a blackout, which I really like. I think the deer do notice cameras that have the red flash more than the blackout ones, so I like the blackout option. So for under 100 bucks, the Moultrie 20i, not a bad choice, but not super sharp images. This is the Primos Proof Cam number 2. Generation 1, that's the key. It's a 12 megapixel camera, and honestly this camera has caused me a lot of problems, me and all my buddies as well. It's got a serious problem with the exposure, so half of your pictures end up being like white clouds that you can't quite see what's going on, a white mist. But the batteries are always a little bit loose in here. They just like kind of barely stay in. So I have to put a little piece of foam to hold them in there just to make sure they're tight and secure when I shut the lid, because I have come back before, like if you hang the camera at an angle and realize, oh, the battery popped out a little bit and it wasn't recording. So generally speaking, stay away from the first generation, go for the generation 2, which I'll talk about now. Moving on to the generation 2, woohoo! We have both the Proof Cam 2 generation 2 and the Proof Cam 3 generation 2. These cameras I do like, I gotta say. They have improved upon that auto exposure issue that they were having in the first generation. Big difference. The images are much better, very few. I mean, you still get a couple whiteouts, but very few. Again, super easy to use. It's the same controls as the first generation. Still that battery issue, so I still use my little piece of foam in there. It does have a spot, yes, just like the generation 1. It's the same camera. The difference is these are 16 megapixels and they take better images. The other generation, generation 1, was 12 megapixels. So I like the 16 megapixel. They take good photo, good video in color. Now these cameras retail for like $180, $190 if you look at the Primos website. However, you can find them on eBay. That is the trick, for around 90 bucks. Frequently, I mean, they keep popping up on there. So if you look at eBay long enough, they're gonna come up. I've gotten a bunch off eBay, and I'll tell you, eBay is the way to go, because no tax and free shipping for under 100 bucks, that's the way to do it. Since these cameras are on the higher end of the $100 spectrum, I did invest in a couple lock boxes, and these are the Primos brand lock boxes. But as I think I said before, I really can't stand lock boxes. They are heavy, they clank, and this one in particular, it has 3 parts. You've got the lockbox, you got to put the camera in there, then you lock this thing on it, and it's, as you see, it's not super easy. There we go. And then you have to put this third piece on in order to lock the thing. And this, once it falls off, it's just a matter of time before this ends up on the floor in the woods somewhere, lost in Never Never Land. So not super crazy about this lockbox design. The other issue is once you have to put the camera in there, put all this stuff on, put the Python lock through, and all that time this thing's clicking away taking pictures. So I always have, you know, 50 pictures at least of me setting up the camera and taking it off again. So again, don't like that lockbox option. So lately what I've been doing actually is hanging my cameras up a little higher in the tree. I use a climbing stick or two, get up around 10 feet and have it at a slight angle down. A little tricky to get the angle right, but something to consider. Okay people, so there you have it. My top pick for the trail camera under $100 is the Primos Proof Cam Generation 2 Series number 3. Proof Cam 3 Generation 2. 16 megapixel is the key. The model number of these, the Generation 2, starts with 64, so that's the key. I think the model numbers of the Generation 1, yeah, they start with 63. So you want the model number that starts with 64, that's how you know it's a Generation 2 and 16 megapixels. Again, check it out on eBay. You'll eventually, it might not be one every day there, but eventually one's gonna pop up, and that's the way to go. Under $100, it's my top pick. So please let me know if you have an option under $100 that you really like and is working for you. Let us all know in the comments below. You help me, I help you. Go out there, hang some trail cameras, buy some trail cameras and hang some trail cameras, and catch some deer this year, huh? All right, be well. Until next time, this is Vital Point, Andrew Penzie signing out.